Welcome back to Spartan Up Podcast. We are here in the Amy Barn. We have Marion behind the camera. We've got Johnny, Sephra, Tim, Joe, and more importantly, this week we have Caspar Craven. This is a guy, one of the ones joined read in the UK. Incredible story. While starting several multi-million-dollar businesses, he sailed around the world not once but twice with his family, including a 2-year-old. 3 kids living on a boat. Incredible stories, and blown away. You're really going to want to check this out.
He almost loses a family member on the trip.
True story.
True story. We are here in the UK, don't ask me why, I still don't know, with Caspar Craven, right?
Absolutely right, yes.
And we just met about 12 seconds ago. I have no idea what he's all about or how he could help us, but I do know he sailed around the world twice, once with his 2-year-old. So there's got to be some nugget in here, something that we're going to learn. Let's dive in. Let's go back in time. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in this tiny little fishing village in the southwest of England, and there was like 35 people there. So out in the middle, I was like, I had my first business when I was 14. I used to sort of have a little fishing boat, and so that's kind of my growing up sort of stage, sort of.
So when I think of fishermen, when the listeners think of fishermen, we think of like hardened, crackly faced, just tough people, and you don't give off that impression at all. You give off like you could be like I'd meet you at the opera. Maybe. But I've heard tough as nails inside. So you're in that fishing village. Pretty tough people, hardcore?
They were pretty hardcore people. So basically, this village, I fell into the sea back in 1914, and these fishermen there were hard as nails. And they used to go out in these tiny sort of 5-meter boats, and they'd be going off sort of 5-10 miles out at sea. And so when I grew up, I used to go out fishing with these guys from the age of 12, 13, and go and sort of get that experience. And so yeah, maybe I look like the sort of person that does opera, but yeah, I've done some stuff like that. So
you look nice as can be. So you grew up in this tough fishing village. How do you get out of there? Most people don't get out. How do you get out?
It's true. So you know what? So I had my first fishing business, and I used to walk around with these T-shirts saying "crabs for sale." People used to laugh, and then I used to sell some stuff. But I was earning good money by the time I was 16, 17. But I figured that I was never going to make enough money selling crabs. So I decided to go to university, and then I trained as an accountant, which I can't think now of any profession which is less suited to what I'm doing now and my story. So
wow. So fisherman turns accountant. Mm-hmm. You probably could add some value back to those fishermen in the village you grew up in, right? Help them count crabs.
Probably. I mean, it's a tough business these days because the regulation has changed and so on. So I love going fishing now, but I don't do it for money.
So you become an accountant, mm-hmm. and because you're in business. You mentioned something right before we get started here that you're in business. So let's dive into the whole business thing before we find out about the trip around the world.
Okay, cool. So 2 trips around the world, exactly. So actually, I'll give you a little bit of timeline. So trained as an accountant, and then I traveled around the world with a backpack, as you do. And then came back from that. I had 5 years as an investment banker, which is another profession that I find myself utterly unsuited to. And I was at the boat show here in London in January 2000, and the opportunity to sail around the world on the world's toughest yacht race just suddenly appeared in front of me like that. And it's one of those things where you make a heartbeat decision, so I'm going to go and do this. So I went and did that, and I came back a year later, a changed person in many ways.
Wow.
And I went and joined the bank.
How many days were you out there at sea? And is that the Volvo?
It was called the BT Global Challenge.
Got it.
So basically it was 10 months, the whole race. There were 12 boats. They were equally matched. And the whole philosophy was ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So a lot of the people had never sailed before, and they went through a training process. And there was one professional skipper on the boat. and they put these teams together. I was after the first leg to Boston, which we actually won. They moved me up to run one of the watches. I was actually the youngest person on the boat at the time. And so we sailed around the world, and it's probably about 6 months at sea and 4 months in port. But lifelong friends, because when you go through something like that with people, I mean, it's just like, wow, incredible experiences. So.
Well, how old were you?
28.
28. All right, so you do that.
Come back from that. The company that I was working for, they very kindly sponsored me to do that race.
Yep.
So I had to do a 1-year lock-in there when I came back. And I came back and I thought, you know what, I want to do my own businesses now. So I started launching my first online businesses then. So back then, 2002, I was launching online dating sites. And at the time, nobody was really doing that. So everybody laughed when I said, this is what I'm doing. So this guy's been an investment banker, and now you're doing dating sites. It's like, what are you doing? So I ran those for probably about 4 or 5 years. Ran out of money.
Mostly UK?
All UK.
Yeah.
All UK. So I ran out of money. Then had to go and take a job. Did a job for 2 years. And then launched my next business after that.
Which was?
It was in data analytics. So we used to work with, there are many twists and turns, but we ended up, we worked with big companies like IBM and Microsoft, and we'd take all their data, and then we'd analyze it and look for patterns and, provide a managed service.
Did it work?
It did. So I ran that in total for 8 years. But back in 2009, so going back 7 years ago, my wife and I, we came up with this idea to go and sail around the world with our kids, and I was still running that business at the time. And we made this committed decision that we were going to go and do this. And it's funny, because you were talking earlier about, you make that decision, and that was what we did. We made this decision that, we're going to take our children, we're going to go and sail around the world, primarily because someone told us that we couldn't do that. So that was
How many children?
So at the time we had 2, but when we actually left we had 3, so it went up by 1.
Got it. And did you have any more when you returned home, or you
No,
3 kids?
No, 3's plenty.
So you've got 3 children. You get on the boat. Where do you leave port?
So we left Southampton here in the UK. And interestingly, by the way, just winding back, I'd done the London Marathon about 4 months before that, and I'd really damaged my L4, L5, which I know you'll know all about, and I had to have some surgery on that like 5 weeks before we left, so I probably shouldn't have gone. Everybody said you can't go, but it's like, you know what, we made that decision, we were going anyway. So, we left Southampton, and then sailed down the European coast to the Canary Islands, and then from there across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. Then from there, Panama Canal, 6 months to go across the Pacific Ocean, Australia, over to South Africa, to Brazil, back up the Caribbean, and then around to San Francisco. So,
how long did the total trip take?
2 years.
2 years. So your 2-year-old was your youngest on the trip. Your 2-year-old was 4 when she got back.
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, Spartans, as you probably know, Four Sigmatic is the new sponsor of Spartan Up podcast. This is a series of mushroom drinks. Some of them are coffee-based. Some of them are like a mushroom tea. And I got home the other day. My wife had surgery. We got home, and there was a box sitting there. I like to think that they sent it specifically as a welcome home after the surgery. But it had about 9 different variations of Four Sigmatic. And what a really cool opportunity for me to dive in. I'd never tried any of them before. And to dive in and start to sample them. So,
what'd you think of the cordyceps, Johnny?
Well, thank you, Seth. I'm glad you asked. You know what was great? So the mushroom coffee is really good. It's just flat out really good. But tasting the different elixirs was a really neat experience because they affect you differently. They really do. I really enjoyed the cordyceps. I found that it gave me really great energy. I found that it helped me focus. I found that it sort of gave me. I could almost. There was probably a little bit of a placebo effect, but on each sip, I was like, I'm ingesting something good and energetic here. It was pretty cool.
Colonel and I'm going to tell you a funny story about when I first found a cordyceps. I was at a primitive skills gathering near Asheville, North Carolina, Firefly gathering. Anyways, this kid, Todd Elliott, he came and took us out. We went on a foraging hike to go find some of these mushrooms. And all of a sudden, on this little branch, we see this dead ant with this mushroom going out of the back of its head. And so cordyceps, isn't that cool?
It is.
So cordyceps, when the ants come across these spores, it kills them, and it grows out of the back of their head. But they're like some of the most medicinal mushrooms you can find.
And so I was going to say, so we're drinking that.
Yeah, so instead of you and I going out and plucking mushrooms off the backs of dead ants, we get to have those medicinal things delivered right to our door. So,
Yeah, but that's always one of those things you wonder who was the first guy, right?
yeah, well,
Who was the first guy to pick that up?
well, guys, so join us in drinking cordyceps and all these yummy mushrooms, and go to foursigmatic.com/Spartan, FOURSIGMATIC.com/Spartan, and when you go to the website, if you use the code Spartan, you get 15% off.
So the older two, when we left, they were 7 and 9.
Nice.
So
And how'd you do the studying? You did basically boat schooling?
we did boat schooling. So when we first told everybody we were going to do this, everybody laughed at us, told us we were crazy, and told us all the reasons we couldn't do it, right? And one of the big things was the education. So before we left, we went and spoke to all our teachers, and we got all the books. So we had literally cupboards which were just exploding with books.
In the boat?
On the boats, yeah. So it's like I could have put loads of spares and safety gear and all that sort of stuff in there, but no, it was the books. And we get 1 month into sailing, and I'm sitting down there trying to get my 7-year-old son, Columbus, to learn about the Tudors and history and stuff like this. And it's just like, it's just not working. So basically, we chuck the books over the side,
Nice.
and we say, okay, what are you interested in? And my son said, I'm interested in fishing. So we got all the fishing books out, and in the space of the next 2-3 days, he read all about the fish all over the world, the oceans they were in, what size they got to, how you catch them. And then we started catching fish. So then he was weighing them, he was measuring them, he started dissecting them, cutting them up so he could understand the different parts of it. And he then set up a business making and selling fishing lures and advice sheets. So he just followed that one thing, and it just took him to all these other different directions.
Through history and through...
So reading, writing, maths, sales, marketing, talking to people, stuff like that. So.
Love it. And he came back. When you came back, they went into school and they're fine, adjusted fine?
So we've been back for 9 months now, and he is... So him in particular, he's back in school, and he's literally just taken to it like a duck to water. And I'd say there's probably 70% of the stuff he's just like way ahead of like everybody else. And his social skills in particular, I mean, it's just insane. And then there's 30% of stuff where they've just missed stuff because they haven't done it. But the really interesting thing for me is the emotional resilience. And so when they come back and say, like, I only got 30% in this exam, and I say, what do you do? And they say, well, I stayed 2 or 3 hours late, and I spoke to different people, and I figured out what was wrong. And for me, that's the thing that I'm most proud of that I've taught them, is what do you do when stuff goes wrong?
Sure. Growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Exactly. You got
Carol
it.
Dweck.
Exactly that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you think they got that on the boat?
Yeah. So we had 3 situations which were pretty scary. And, we as a family, me, my wife, and the 3 kids, we dealt with those scary situations.
You can't leave us hanging.
I had to put that there, didn't I?
What's the scary situations? What do we got? Shark attacks, whales, storms, lightning. What was it?
All of that stuff. So the first one was we were 500 miles from the nearest piece of land. It was like in the most remote part of the Pacific Ocean, and we had complete power failure. So no engine, no navigation, so we don't know where we are, no autopilot to steer the boat, no toilets, no cooker, no water pumps, nothing. And we're there, and it's just literally the 5 of us. And of course, when stuff goes wrong like that, right, you've got huge seas, so you've got like 40-foot waves breaking over the boats, you've got gale force winds bashing you around, and there's just 5 of us. And there's ships out there as well, but they can't see you because you've got no lights and no navigation stuff, so you potentially get run over as well. So that was the first scary situation. It took us 4 days to kind of claw our way out of that. My wife and I would like steer the boat for half an hour at a time each, and the kids would bring us food up on deck, and we like really work together as a team. But the kids saw us, and they saw how we dealt with stuff. And it's like, nobody's panicking, everybody's cool, and we spend a lot of time working on our values. How do we show up? How do we behave? And they kind of responded to that, and, So they saw how we acted when stuff goes wrong.
Ultimately, kids learn from watching us, right, and watching the people around them and the environment they're in. So yeah, that's amazing to see. Now, the 2-year-old wasn't necessarily picking that stuff up.
You know what? My 2-year-old, I call her my leader on the pitch. You know the whole the leadership philosophy about your first follower?
Yeah.
So she is my first follower. So if I want to make anything happen in our family, I say with enough energy and enthusiasm, Willow, she's my 5-year-old now. I say, Willow, should we go and do this? And she's like, yeah, let's go and do it. And once she starts, then my wife will follow, and then the other 2 will follow. So she is like the key to my family and making stuff happen. And she's just emits energy, and yeah, she's amazing. So it's
That's great. And your other child?
So my 7-year-old Columbus, he's like a really sort of detailed thinker, and he loves getting involved in the details. So whenever we have a problem when the electronics didn't work, do I try and figure it out, or do I find a 7-year-old kid who's going to love this stuff? And it's like he's figuring all this stuff out. And my oldest daughter Bluebell, she was 9 when we left. Then she was just amazing at the sort of making sure everyone was okay. She'd look after me. She did a lot of cooking, and she also had the courage of a lion. So I'll tell you a story. So in Tonga, there's this really famous cave called Mariner's Cave, and you have to dive down 2 meters, swim along 4 meters, and you pop up inside this underwater cavern, and it's beautiful light down there. And she was in the water, and she was like, I want to do this. But she was fearful because it's quite scary going down for that amount of time. And I looked at her, and someone has that look in their eye that's like, they're going through here, they're going to do something. She had that look. And she went down there and she did it. And we have a big picture of her. It's a beautiful photo at home. And whenever she's stuck with something, I said, do you remember the courage you had when you did that Mariner's Cave moment? And it's like, bang, it's like such a powerful anchor.
Yeah.
And
that's that success breeds success concept, yeah.
Exactly.
And then you stopped along the way, obviously. And when you would stop, you would refuel and resupply. And how long would you stay in port?
Different places, different times. So sometimes for a week. In South Africa, we stayed there for about 4 or 5 weeks. So so different places, different times, basically. So it's
how often would you stop?
It depends on the passages. So when we left Panama, going across towards Australia, so the first sailing stretch was like 3 to 4 weeks at sea. And that's a long time on a small boat with 3 kids. and then we got to the next islands, the Marquesa Islands, where they still have cannibals and stuff like that. We stayed there for probably 2 or 3 weeks. And then the next bit was 2 weeks sailing. And so it was different times, just depending on what islands there were in the way. So
when you stopped at port, would you buckle down and do some schoolwork and stuff like that? Or was it easier at sea because there was less distraction? That's
exactly. So the long passages were the best ones because then you get into a rhythm and a routine. And actually, after 3 weeks at sea, you get an island coming up. So you know what? We're quite happy to just carry on going because you have a really nice rhythm of land. Right. But when you get onto land, then everything changes and you have disruption and more stuff. So my takeaway for people is think about what it is you want to go and do. Make it really rich, really vivid. Talk about it like all the time and just create that picture. And the other part of that is I'm a great believer in we rather than me. So when we had the first idea, here was what I wanted to do. Here was what my wife wanted to do. I wanted to go sailing around the world. She wanted to go traveling. And if we just said, I want to go and do this, I want to go do this, we would have like bashed heads. But what we did, we just focused on what this bit was we had in common. And we dropped everything else. And we talked about that. We got energy, we got excitement. And that grew and that grew. So it ended up incorporating everything that we wanted. But because we were both totally bought into it and totally engaged, that was what we locked in onto. And then once we had that clear picture, then we started figuring out the how-to. And the how-to stuff was painful. I mean, there was a lot of stuff we had to do, building businesses. I created 3 different $1 million businesses in that space of the 5 years we gave us to do that. But if I tried to figure out how on day 1 or even day 60 or day 90, we would never have got there. So take your vision, make it vivid, make it real, and do it together, that we piece.
What's next?
So we've been back for 9 months now, And we are now, we spent the last 9 months since we've been back designing our next vision of the future. And literally just last weekend, we came up with it. It's a vision painted on our walls. We tell everybody about this stuff. So we've designed a world that we call First Class Worlds, which is about how we want to live. And, the thing for us now, for me in particular, is I really want to contribute to other people. And the stuff that we've done has been transformative in our lives. And I want to share this with as many people as possible. And just, because this is cool stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I know that you talk about. Sure. So I have a book coming out called Where the Magic Happens.
How could people learn more? How could they get to you?
Thank you. So my website, CasparCraven.com, CasparCraven.com.
That was awesome.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We talk a lot about obstacles and about, day-to-day life, the things that we find a little stressful. Imagine being 500 miles from the closest anything with your family, no power, no navigation, no steering.
Sounds great. You got celestial navigation.
So there's a side story that didn't come out in the interview that I found out. I actually flew to San Francisco and got on his boat.
Yeah.
And the boat's not that big. I tricked my family. I brought my kids and my wife onto the boat, and I said, hey, we're going to go sail around the world. And they're just going to give us a quick 30-minute heads up on how to control all these things and set the sails, and then we're out of here. And in that conversation...
And they were ready to go.
My kids were ready. My wife was a little unsure.
A little.
But his 2-year-old had fallen off the bunk bed and split, his head split open. Mm-hmm. And... they were 6 days away from anywhere, so they had to get on the phone, on the radio, and they had to talk to a doctor to figure out what to do. And he goes, I lost my kid. Yeah. And the doctor said, you're going to have to tie the child's hair up and make stitches using hair. And they did it, and the kid survived. But he said it was a scary moment, and it was when the radio went down and the storms that rolled in.
I mean, I don't know if you're going to know this
they
answer.
They don't have med kits
why
and sutures
hair
in them?
versus? Yeah, exactly.
As a
like
suture rather than the stitches. I don't know what the reason was.
Fishing line or something.
Yeah,
on the
no,
boat.
it was use the hair was what came from the doctor.
It's amazing the things we don't think about with this. The idea about going and sailing around the world with your family. People immediately go to, oh my God, a 2-year-old crying. Oh my God, the same food. You don't think about that when people take on these giant challenges. Raise Ahab going up into the Arctic. Yeah. Joe, you've done some climbing, and my appendix burst last year, and it was awful. I was in the hospital for a couple of days, and it was really, really bad. A year before that, I'd been on Aconcagua, and I think if my appendix bursts and I'm at 19,000 feet, right, I'm probably dead. Right. And so, when you go sailing around the world with your family, this is a pretty big commitment. And, when your kid falls off the bunk bed and hits their head, that's a lot bigger than that you forgot their crayons at home.
Well, no, he said, sorry to interrupt, Sephra, he basically said when stuff goes wrong on a boat, it's exponentially worse.
Real wrong, for sure.
Yeah, but instead of focusing on the negative, what I think is worse is having your kids locked up on a phone in a city for the whole time. So I think taking the dangers of adventure and saying let's look at the stars of navigation and let's fish in the sea and let's learn what's going on down below us and let's go port to port and smell and taste and see and live life. Then, especially everyone's like, oh, climate change. I'm like, great, more places to sail. So I think the sailors are going to save the world, right? I don't know.
So maybe that's what Trump is thinking by not getting in the Paris Accord. I don't know.
I have always wanted to sail in Nebraska. You're right.
And no offense, Miami, you're going to be a great-looking reef.
Hey,
okay,
let's get back to sailing. I'd say, but I liked when he was talking about the children, though, when they came back and about school, right? And about how, they might not have known this lesson out of this particular book, but their knowledge base was so much broader, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That they knew so much more, and how they just got involved in the learning to fish and then taking that and following that thread all the way through, and how many different things you can learn from doing that. Not like homeschoolers do, but
for sure.
People think. Sorry, Johnny, go.
No, I was going to say that really jumped at me too when he talked about stop trying to force kids to learn the way that we want to teach them. Find out what they're excited about, and then harness that in the teaching and the learning. And kids will learn a lot faster if it's something they're excited about, and find ways to weave the lessons into that. I've heard that before, and that was really powerful in this one as well.
That's why I went back and got my teaching master's in education, because I'm going what is this model of education? Why are we being tortured in the times when your brain is most susceptible to sit and and just doesn't work? And I realized that it's only been 200 years that we've had this form of education. And it's in a
industrialized form of education while people working in the factories. Kids had to be codified into their age groups, into their things, and then taught this standardized curriculum. And people think like, oh, you homeschoolers, how bohemian. And it's like, actually, when kids are young and their brains are in their most supple, it's like when they get to be around the mentorship of their parents, if you actually calculate how many hours your kids are spending with teachers versus you, it's like, who do you want them to be mimicking after? I mean, what values? I mean, I'm sure teachers are great. I love teachers. Many of my friends are teachers. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm just saying, like,
You like them as much as doctors?
Blessings to all of their universes.
He had a really funny thing to say. He said before they got on the boat, the teachers actually called him, Caspar, and said, hey, we have a problem.
And he gave you the books?
No. You got to come in because your kid's just got a tremendous fantasy. And he came in and he
How
said,
is that a problem?
He said, your kid's saying that he doesn't need to learn this new lesson because he's leaving anyway and going to sail around the world.
Love that kid. That kid can be on my team. You want to know why? Because
Caspar said, well, yeah, we're going around
the
the
way
world.
you learn is by interaction with your natural environment, interaction with people. That kid on the boat is going to understand all of that knowledge and everything a heck of a lot better than if they're reading about fish, morphology in a stupid text. I love textbooks. I don't know.
It's not the boat, and it's not being at home. It is that when you can pare it down and you've got 2 parents and 3 children, you're getting one-on-one or 1 point, whatever that would be, 5, teachers to student. You're in a classroom and it's 1 to 30, 35, whatever it is. So you can focus, your lessons and your learning, right? And you
go along with their passion.
Well, right, but then you have
nurture those little seeds.
I agree, but I'm saying even if it wasn't passion, the one-on-one interaction makes learning a whole lot more personal and easier, I think, than trying to sit in a classroom of 30 kids and learn.
And Joe, it's not sailing around the world, but you in the last couple of years have taken your family and moved to different cultures. And Courtney was saying at dinner the other night that one of the things she likes the most about that is how much you guys are together and how the kids, spend time with each other and with you, and the idea that
you build an unbreakable unit because you're traveling together and you're in this new place together.
Yeah, it's huge. And
experiencing it all together.
And you look at our current model in society of, parents get up and they go to work and they come home and they spend a little bit of time with their kids and everyone goes to sleep and they get up and they go to work. Not saying that that's inherently awful, but just anytime that you can create a situation that's going to allow you to spend more time, as Tim says, one-on-one with your kids, the learning for both of you. You think about what you learn as a parent from your kids when you can spend that kind of time together, whether it's getting on a boat and sailing around the world, moving to Japan, or just going away camping for the weekend. It's really, really important time, not just for the kids, but for us too as parents. So any opportunity we get to do that is great.
So if you're stuck at home, you're on the couch, you're wondering what to do with your kids this weekend, in addition to watching Spartan Up podcast at spartan.com/podcast, you could go camping, you could collect acorns, you can join the military.
And I'm going to say, it's not a bad idea either. Going on a Spartan race together. And we don't talk enough about the actual race. That's a great opportunity to go spend time as a family for several hours out in the woods on a course.
Thank you for watching another epic story of success. If you like our message, please share Spartan Up with your friends and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you catch our show, maybe in the woods. Spartan Up is brought to you by Spartan Race. To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.